What do you do when the enemy sends a sniper specifically to hunt you down, and you trip over a fallen tree at the exact moment he pulls the trigger? What does it feel like to swap positions with the man trying to kill you, both of you moving through the same patch of jungle, until you end up staring at each other's old hiding spot from opposite sides? And what happens when the only thing that gives him away is a tiny flash of sunlight reflecting off his own rifle scope for just a fraction of a second, and you have exactly one shot to make it count before he finishes what he came to do? U.S. Marine Corps veterans still tell the story of Gunnery Sergeant Carlos Hathcock and the enemy sniper known only as Cobra, sent into the jungles of Vietnam with a single mission: kill the man wearing the white feather. We'll show you exactly how that duel actually ended in a moment. First, you need to understand exactly why the enemy wanted Hathcock dead badly enough to send their own best shooter after him. This is the story of Carlos Hathcock. U.S. Marine veterans still call him one of the greatest snipers this country has ever produced. The threat by 1966, Gunnery Sergeant Carlos Hathcock had become something the North Vietnamese Army and Viet Cong forces operating in his area had never quite dealt with before. A single American sniper so consistently, devastatingly effective that his reputation had spread well beyond the immediate units he operated against. Hathcock wore a small white feather tucked into the band of his bush hat, a personal touch that, rather than staying hidden, became a deliberate signature, and enemy forces came to know him by name, referring to him as Long Trang, the White Feather Sniper. The North Vietnamese eventually placed a bounty on his head worth $30,000, an extraordinary sum for the era, a direct reflection of exactly how much damage a single American marksman had managed to inflict on morale and operational movement in his area of the war. Hathcock's path to becoming that kind of feared, singular presence in the jungle began well before Vietnam, rooted in a childhood spent hunting small game in rural Arkansas to help feed his family during years of genuine hardship. He enlisted in the Marine Corps on his 17th birthday, and by the time he deployed to Vietnam, he had already won multiple national shooting championships, including the prestigious Wimbledon Cup competition, establishing him as one of the finest marksmen in the entire Marine Corps, well before he ever fired a shot in combat. That foundation of competitive precision shooting, combined with a hunter's patience developed over years of tracking game as a boy, produced exactly the combination of technical skill and psychological discipline that made him so uniquely dangerous once he began operating as a combat sniper. Frustrated by their inability to eliminate Hathcock through conventional means, enemy commanders made a specific, deliberate decision. They would send their own best sniper, a shooter known to American forces only by the nickname Cobra, with a single assignment: track down and kill the White Feather Sniper. Cobra's skill was immediately, brutally apparent. He killed a Marine gunnery sergeant just outside Hathcock's own position, a direct, calculated message that the hunt had officially begun, and that Cobra intended to finish it. The decision to dispatch a dedicated counter-sniper specifically against Hathcock reflects a level of operational seriousness that Vietnamese commanders rarely extended toward a single individual American serviceman. Standard countermeasures against an effective enemy sniper typically involved area denial tactics, artillery, ambush patrols, or simply avoiding the contested terrain the sniper was known to operate in. Committing a specialized, highly trained counter-sniper to a personal, dedicated hunt represented a significant escalation, an acknowledgement that Hathcock's continued presence in the field had become costly enough, in both material and psychological terms, to justify pulling one of the enemy's own most skilled shooters away from broader unit operations for the specific purpose of eliminating a single opposing marksman. The secret development: there was no secret weapon or special equipment that decided the duel between Hathcock and Cobra. What there was instead was two of the most patient, disciplined shooters either side had in the entire theater, tracking each other through dense jungle terrain where a single mistake, a single sound, a single moment of carelessness meant death. Hathcock, together with his spotter John Burke, set out to track the enemy sniper responsible for killing their fellow Marine, working slowly and carefully through terrain that offered concealment to both hunter and hunted in equal measure. At one point during the stalk, Hathcock stumbled, tripping over a fallen tree at the exact moment Cobra fired at him from a concealed position. The shot missed Hathcock directly but struck Burke's canteen instead, a near miss that confirmed, in the most immediate and personal way possible, that Cobra had already located them and was actively trying to kill them both. The relationship between a sniper and his spotter, exemplified here by Hathcock and Burke, represented an essential and often underappreciated element of exactly how these missions actually functioned in the field. A spotter's role extended well beyond simply helping identify targets, encompassing constant situational awareness, terrain analysis, and the kind of second set of eyes that could catch details a single shooter, focused intently through a scope, might otherwise miss entirely. Burke's canteen absorbing the shot meant to kill his partner speaks to just how close the two men worked together physically in the field, a proximity that made the spotter every bit as exposed to the same mortal risk the sniper himself faced throughout the entire operation. That shared danger, and the trust required to operate as a functioning two-man team under exactly this kind of sustained, mutual threat, formed the foundation that made an encounter as precise and disciplined as the eventual duel with Cobra possible at all. What followed was a piece of tactical maneuvering that reads almost like a choreographed exchange. Cobra, having taken his shot and understanding that his own position was now compromised, moved to a new location, precisely the kind of disciplined repositioning any competent sniper executes immediately after firing. Hathcock and Burke, recognizing the same principle, moved as well. In the confusion of that mutual repositioning, the two sniper teams effectively swapped locations, each ending up roughly where the other had started, staring back across the same stretch of jungle from the opposite direction. The psychological dimension of that mutual repositioning deserves particular attention, because both sniper teams were operating under the exact same tactical logic simultaneously, each trying to outthink an opponent who was, in turn, trying to outthink them using an identical set of principles. Hathcock later reflected that the entire exchange felt less like a conventional firefight and more like an elaborate, deadly game of positioning, each side reading the other's likely next move and adjusting accordingly, fully aware that a single miscalculation in that silent, patient calculation could end the encounter permanently. That both men arrived at the same underlying tactical conclusion, reposition immediately after revealing your location, is precisely what put them in the unusual, almost symmetrical arrangement that ultimately decided the entire duel. Technical supremacy. There is no chapter in this story about superior American weaponry, because Hathcock's shot that decided the entire duel came down to a single, fleeting visual detail and the discipline to recognize exactly what it meant in the fraction of a second available to notice it at all. As the two snipers settled into their swapped positions, Hathcock realized that the specific spot Cobra now occupied faced directly into the afternoon sun, an accident of positioning that put the enemy sniper at a critical, if momentary, disadvantage. Scanning the tree line, Hathcock caught a small, brief glint of light, sunlight reflecting directly off the glass of Cobra's own rifle scope as the enemy sniper aimed back in his direction. Hathcock had, at most, a fraction of a second to recognize what that glint actually represented and to act on it before Cobra completed his own shot. He fired directly at the glint itself, without a clear view of the shooter's body, trusting his read of the reflection completely. The bullet, a 173-grain round, traveled the full length of Cobra's own rifle scope, passing directly through the tube before striking the enemy sniper in the eye and killing him instantly. When Hathcock and Burke later recovered the body and the weapon, they found the scope itself hollowed out along its entire length by the bullet's path, physical confirmation of a shot that depended entirely on recognizing, in an instant, exactly what a tiny flash of reflected sunlight actually meant, and trusting that read enough to fire without a fully confirmed target. The margin for error in that single decision was, by any reasonable measure, almost non-existent. Had the glint of light come from some other source entirely, a piece of broken glass, water catching the sun, any number of naturally occurring reflective surfaces common in jungle terrain. Hathcock would have fired at nothing, revealing his own position to an enemy sniper who remained very much alive and now aware of exactly where the shot had originated. Had he hesitated even a second or two longer to gain additional visual confirmation, Cobra, already aiming in his direction, would very likely have fired first. The shot succeeded precisely because Hathcock's accumulated experience allowed him to correctly interpret an extraordinarily subtle piece of visual information in a fraction of a second and commit to acting on it immediately, a form of expertise that cannot be taught through marksmanship drills alone, built instead through the same kind of sustained field experience and situational pattern recognition that separated Hathcock from nearly every other shooter operating in the same theater of war. The global impact. Hathcock himself would later describe it plainly as the best shot he ever made, a striking assessment from a man whose career included the longest confirmed sniper kill of the entire war, a shot exceeding 2,500 yards using a scope-mounted .50 caliber machine gun, a record that stood unbroken for 35 years afterward. The duel with Cobra carried a different kind of weight than the distance record, because it had been a direct, personal contest between two hunters, each specifically tasked with killing the other, decided by a margin of recognition and reaction time measured in a fraction of a second, rather than by raw distance or firepower. Hathcock's broader combat record in Vietnam, 93 officially confirmed kills, with his own estimate running considerably higher given how strict the wartime confirmation requirements actually were, cemented his reputation as one of the most effective snipers in American military history. But it was stories like the duel with Cobra, precise, personal, and decided by the narrowest possible margin of skill and instinct, that gave his legend its most enduring shape among the Marines who served alongside him, and the generations of snipers trained in the decades since. The strict confirmation standard that limited Hathcock's official tally to 93 kills deserves its own explanation, because it illustrates just how conservative that number actually was relative to his real battlefield impact. Every confirmed kill required independent verification from a credentialed officer beyond Hathcock's own spotter, a standard that excluded the substantial majority of engagements that occurred in circumstances where no qualifying third-party witness happened to be present. Hathcock himself, along with military historians who later studied his service record, estimated his actual total fell somewhere between 300 and 400 enemy combatants, a figure that, while unofficial, reflects the genuinely sustained scale of his impact across more than a year of continuous, dangerous field operations deep in contested territory. Conclusion: Carlos Hathcock went on after Vietnam to help establish the Marine Corps Scout Sniper School at Quantico, Virginia, directly shaping the training and doctrine that would produce generations of American snipers long after his own combat service had ended. He suffered from multiple sclerosis in his later years, a condition that eventually forced his medical retirement from the Marine Corps in 1979, and he continued speaking candidly about his wartime experiences until his death in 1999, giving detailed interviews that historians and fellow veterans relied on to document exactly what stories like the Cobra duel had actually involved. Hathcock's willingness to speak openly about his combat experiences, at a time when many Vietnam veterans understandably remained reluctant to revisit the war in public detail, gave historians and the broader Marine Corps community an unusually rich, direct record of exactly how someone in his position actually thought through and executed the split-second decisions that defined his most famous encounters. Author Charles Henderson's 1986 book, Marine Sniper, drew extensively on these interviews to construct the most complete public account of Hathcock's service, including the duel with Cobra, cementing the story's place in Marine Corps lore for a generation of readers and future snipers who would never have the chance to hear it directly from Hathcock himself. That combination, a willing subject and a diligent chronicler, is precisely why this particular story survived in such vivid, specific detail rather than fading into the kind of vague, second-hand legend that claims fewer verifiable details the further removed it becomes from the men who actually lived it. U.S. Marine veterans who study Hathcock's career consistently return to the same detail when explaining exactly what made him so effective, that his skill was never simply about marksmanship in the mechanical sense. It was built on a level of sustained patience and disciplined observation that most people, civilian or military, genuinely struggle to comprehend. The ability to lie motionless in dense jungle terrain for hours, tracking a single fleeting detail like a reflection off glass, and to trust that split-second read completely when the moment to act finally arrived. That is the story U.S. Marine veterans still tell about the duel with Cobra, not simply a dramatic shot, but the culmination of exactly the kind of discipline the Marine Corps sniper training was built to instill, tested in the most direct and personal way one hunter can ever be tested by another. The Marine Corps Scout Sniper School that Hathcock helped establish at Quantico following his own combat service carries his influence directly into the training of every Marine sniper who has passed through the program since. Rather than treating his own remarkable field experience as simply a personal legend to be admired from a distance, Hathcock devoted years of his subsequent career to systematically incorporating the lessons of exactly this kind of encounter, patience, situational awareness, and the disciplined interpretation of subtle environmental detail into a formal curriculum that could be taught to new generations of Marines. That institutional legacy, arguably, represents an even more lasting contribution than any single confirmed kill or record-setting shot from his own combat tour. A direct line running from one man's extraordinary battlefield instincts in the jungles of Vietnam to the structured, deliberate training that continues shaping American military marksmanship doctrine to this day.